Now let's hop into Illustrator. So for now, the only thing we're setting up this week, we're going to be all in on rendering this illustration for the next week. So you're going to set up a print file, which by nature is going to be CMYK, which is what we want. Most of you probably like to measure in inches, so that's a good bet. I think, was it 7 by 10 or something like that, the size of the image, and it was a horizontal image. So I'm just going to use the default of letter size paper, right? I'm going to cut and paste this at the end, so I'm not really that concerned about that. I don't need any bleed on this, and I'm CMYK and 300 resolution. So this in Illustrator is about what color mode I'm working in, so what my default palette will be in, and also what pixels per inch I want to export, which in this case is 300, which is the default and is correct. So we'll go ahead and say, we could actually name it here too. We'll call it EB10, so that goes on all your files, and we're going to call this figure, and I'm going to call it demo, so I know it's this one. And I can go ahead and say create. Now remember, it's going to create my file. It's not going to save my file though, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and give that a save. And I'm going to put it into my folder. And which folder?
Illustration. Oh, no, template.
Yeah, no, you're perfect.
Oh.
Yep, it's the Illustrator file, so I want to save it right to here. And I want to make sure, and I'm not entirely sure how this happens, but sometimes when people bring work from home, they bring it back and it's a PDF. Whenever you're working on a live illustration, you want to keep it in Illustrator. I have yet to figure out why that happens, but just pay attention, especially if you're working at home, that it stays there. I'm going to Command minus to zoom out here, maybe.
You have the Illustrator options window that popped up for saving.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to click on OK there. All right, so we've got this guy here. So you guys are going to tell me, I'm going to make a new layer for my template. You did this for the last project, so you walk me through it. What should I do?
File, please.
You got it. There's my first step. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Place. Okay, now what?
The loop demo one, and then
Link template.
Okay, now I can turn this on here, but remember if I turn it on here, it's going to lock it. So that's where this becomes an option for you. If you don't want it to lock, leave that open or turn it on. It's up to you. We can go ahead and say place. And then I can line this up kind of in my corner and lay it in there, put it where I want it. Now if I haven't clicked on that box, what do I need to do?
Double click on layer.
make it
And
into a template.
template.
You got it. Right? Now, I may want it to dim. I may not want it to dim. In this case, for right now, I don't want it to dim. I want the full effect here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And now I know that that's a template. I like to also move it down to the bottom because I want to be able to work over it. And I like to start with really just the basics. So when I zoom in here, one of the things that I want you to think about when you build this is I want you to think about if you were going to physically make this, what would go on top of other things, right? So for instance, if I'm wearing a hat, it goes on top of my head, right? So rendering the hat on top of the face is a good plan. My hair is on top of my skull. So rendering the hair layer, so sometimes just creating some of these layers, right? So my hair would be on top of my basic shapes. And you might end up with more than one layer for your hat, right? But the basic shapes here, if I keep this sort of organized, I can start to build things up. So another thing is clothing, right? always making sure that you render your clothing. So if I'm rendering the neck, I want to render the neck so that it goes kind of underneath the clothing, right? Not like right up to it. That's where you get those weird little lines, and that's the beauty of being able to just slightly like adjust that line. So as you start to work into this, let's go ahead here and let's turn and lock those off, and let's work just in our basic shapes. Now, you will earn an F if you don't do this next step. So it's pretty freaking important. All right? I want you to go into your swatches, and I want you to get rid of all of them. I don't know how many users there are to Adobe, millions. Everybody has that palette. You don't need it. You need black, white registration. So you just grab them all. So I just clicked and dragged from red down to purple, or from purple up to red, and then I hit delete. And I say yes. And now I'm the artist. This is my palette. I make this the way I want it to be. So if I'm going to work in terms of colors here, let's make this a little bit bigger so that we can see it a little bit better. I can go right in here, and I can go down to this layer here. Actually, I don't even need, if it's on here, I don't even need to, do I? Yes, I do need to unlock it, right? And I can pick up my colors from this original. So it doesn't mean that the colors are perfect, but what it does mean is that I can start to come through and I can pick up on some of the different values that I'm going to use.
That's a lot of colors.
And really dark, right? So I can pull those things into here. I can also arrange them, right? Lightest to darkest, so that I can use them in a grouping. I can also go in and say, okay, this was the pixel sample, but maybe it looks a little bit too warm to me. So I can also come in here and fine adjust it, pull a little bit of that magenta out, and lighten that image up. This looks a little too dark to me. I'm going to pull all the black out of it, and I'm going to also push a little yellow, pull a little pink, and pull a little blue out of it, and that'll give me a little bit lighter. So I can refine that palette, right? This is how I want you to own this project. I want your palette to be as beautiful as your illustration, right? Yeah. And the beautiful thing is, no cleanup. No cleanup for this palette. You don't have to wash it. Like, it's all just there and looking pretty. So it's that easy. Start there today. And then I can go through and do the same thing for my other parts as well. But I don't want to make you sit here all day today. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this back up. And I'm just going to do a quick pen tool demonstration and how I would do the basic shapes here, just to give you kind of a feel for what we would do here. Although this is really hard for me today because my son had a tick yesterday. So every time I look at him now, I'm like freaking out. Lyme disease, Lyme disease, Lyme disease. It's our second tick. I mean, he plays outside all the time, so it's hard to miss. So, all right. Too much information, I know. Okay, so if I'm working in here and I'm working on my basic shapes layer, I have to be on the layer to make it active. And as I start out, I want to really, so I like to use the squint rule when I do an illustration, right? You know what the squint rule is? Like when you're squinting at a Christmas tree and you make all those sparkly lights look really awesome. So the same thing can happen if you squint at this image. I'm going to see certain areas where I know I've got defining dark areas that tell me part of the story. And so by paying attention to those, I can do the best work possible. So if I'm starting here with like a basic underlying shape, I'm going to go ahead and here's one of my favorite suggestions. You know, we talked about things being under other things, right? So if I'm going to draw his beautiful little head here, right? I'm going to draw right along, there's a nice little C, so we can go to here. And then I got to turn this out and just give it a little bend there. Switch direction here. Oh, we can go back. I forgot his cheek. We can dance down here. We can dance down here. Dance down here. Dance down here. Now, what I need to do is make a decision here. So what I'm probably going to do is go with my lighter version here. So I'm going to come kind of right up the edge of this shadow, and I can add more definition later, but by kind of capturing this now, I'm going to come right up underneath the hat. Now I don't have to worry about any lines underneath the hat, right? So there's his weird first part of his face. Now here's the part that I feel like people tend to forget. Eyeballs and mouths, they're openings, they're holes, yes, in our head, where beautiful, beautiful eyes come through, beautiful words come out. So why would we paste an eye on top of a face, right? No, no, no. Instead, think of it this way. Draw the opening so we got that guy there. And we got this guy here.
Would that be on the same layer?
Yep.
As the face? Okay.
So I'm now going to take these two shapes, Command G to group them. I'm going to take this shape here. I'm going to go ahead and make it solid. And then there's a couple ways I can do this, but probably the easiest way is just go ahead and go to Pathfinder. And where I have overlap, I want to cut it out. And so if I go on there, I now have little holes where I can put my eyeballs behind everything else, right? So I've got this little shape here, and then I could continue to come through and edit this. So if I don't get it exactly perfect, or if I then look at my illustration and I go, oh yeah, maybe I need to just soften this a little bit, I don't want too hard of a line, I can go like that. And then I can continue to kind of work over it and come into this next section here. And go into my next section here. And I've got a really harsh shadow there, but I'm going to kind of add my real shadow details later on. Now, if you like, you can always go to outline mode. And because you have that set up as a template, it's still going to show you that, so you can draw your lines one right on top of the other. It just kind of depends on how you like to work. Let's go ahead and go to the next darkest color there. And there we go, right? And again, I can always come in here and I can adjust this once I get it. I also tend to be a person who likes to then send everything to the back, so that my initial shapes are more to the front than the other. So if I want to send both of these back, I can grab this that's already behind, I can grab this, and I can say Object, Arrange, Send to Back, right? And then I have the integrity of my first basic elements going on there, and then I can build out from there as I come down and do the rest of his neck. Now this, even though I'm going to have hair, I'm probably going to want to fix, right? That's just a thing for me. Right? I like to have my hat go underneath everything else. So as you build up these layers, as you start to work through them, then I can come through here and I can turn this off and I can make a layer for something like, I'm going to tuck that underneath there. I'm going to go ahead in here. I'm going to go ahead in here. Let's create a quick palette here. Now you can also switch up your color just by playing around with how much of each of these colors are in there, right? So there's different ways. Some people prefer to work in this color picker here. Some people prefer to kind of use something kind of in this range here to get closer. I might want to exaggerate a little bit the color or tone that I'm looking for, and then start to kind of build upon that. So let's go ahead here. And again, I can draw that into my palette. And then I can work right from there. And when I double click on it, it allows me to come in and to create darker versions of it through some minor adjustments. Oh, a little too rich. Let's go there. Oh. Let's duplicate that so we don't screw it up. How about that? Right, so some of these colors I can just work down like that. So just a really quick, let's do a lower section here. Now I know the iris would come out kind of around here. So I'm going to do one of these. And I'm actually going to use that color. And then I'm going to go up here. And I'm going to come around that same area again. Come right up into there, come right up under the eyelashes, and go with my darker color, object, arrange, send to back. Now, outline mode, pen tool. And I'll go with just this straight up black for now. And put that up there. So now I've got these basic shapes. So I'm starting to move somewhere. So when I turn this on, it's automatically tucking that behind what's there, right? So I already, as I start to move out, I already start to have more information in there for me to use. And you'll notice that the exaggeration of color is going to become important. It might be a little too blue, but I can go in there and adjust it. But that exaggeration of color, when an eyeball is going to be this big in the final illustration, if we go too flat with color, we're not going to get the essence of it. So the eyedropper gets you in the zone, right? Your mind needs to think about how to adjust cyan, magenta, yellow, and black to make it work for you, right? A couple of key tips when you're working with colors. Let's make another duplicate layer here. And let's go to new swatch, or actually let's just duplicate the swatch. So people's gut instinct is throw some black in there to make it darker, all right? What did you learn in drawing? And I know my gaming people didn't, but my art people, what did you learn in drawing about when you make shadow, let's say with colored pencil? Do you use black? You can use the opposite color on the color wheel. Yep. What else? So, anybody use indigo blue? So always a safe bet to push a little cyan and a little bit magenta kind of close into that range as you move into that darker range to give you those variations in color that you want to have. And that'll give you a range of value, right? So you're building this whole entire palette up. You're really open. I somehow made that a spot color. No, it should be process. Oh, I clicked global, right? We don't want any of those little corners on here. We want everything to be CMYK.